Yo, what's going on guys, Jin here. Hope you're all doing well. This is my take on a Mythic version of a Chain Lightning build. It's strong enough with my current gear to do up to tier 85 Pits, and can obviously take out all of the usual Torment 4 content, including Lilith, Duriel, Endariel, etc. So if you like these kinds of guides, or just enjoy the videos in general, please leave a like, subscribe, hit the bell, and leave a comment if you want to. I appreciate it a lot, thank you very much, and now let's get to the build. So for the skill tree, we're going with 2 into Firebolt. In our core skills, we're going to take 3 into Elemental Dominance, 5 into Chain Lightning, and go for the Greater Chain Lightning. In our defensive skills, we're taking 5 into Teleport, going for the Shimmering Teleport, 3 into Glass Cannon, 1 into Ice Armor, going for Shimmering Ice Armor, 1 into Energy Focus, and 3 into Dampen Layer. In our Conjuration skills, we're taking 1 into Familiar, going for Invoked Familiar, 1 into Ice Blades, going for Summoned Ice Blades, 1 into Align the Elements to get the 3 in Protection. We're also getting 3 in Conjuration Mastery, and 3 in Mana Shield. In our Mastery skills, we're going to take 1 into Inner Flames, and 3 into Devouring Blaze, and then we're going to take 2 into Static Discharge, and 3 into Invigorating Conduit. Then our ultimate skills, we're going to take 1 into Permafrost to get that 3 in Hoarfrost, 3 into Elemental Synergies, 3 into Evocation, 1 into Unstable Currents, and taking Prime Unstable Currents as well, and then also 1 into Coursing Currents, and 3 into Electrocution. As for our key passive, we're going to be taking Veer's Mastery. As for our enchantments, we're going to be taking Ice Blades as our first enchantment, so for every 40 seconds in cooldowns we spend, we spawn an Ice Blades on a random enemy. And our second enchantment is going to be Firebolt, so direct damage from skills applies burning damage over 8 seconds, and this allows us to get the bonus from the Devouring Blaze passive. Next up, the Paragon Board. So in our starting board, we're going to be going for the Destruction Glyph. That gives us critical strike damage, and critical strikes increase all damage the enemy takes from us by 2% for 10 seconds, up to 12%. And for the legendary bonus, we get an increase in critical strike damage multiplier. For our second board, we're going for Fundamental Release, so each time we apply Vulnerable, Burning, or Critically Strike an enemy, they take 10% increased damage from us, up to 30%. And the glyph we're going to be using is Elementalist. This gives us a bonus to all rare nodes within range, and dealing fire, cold, or lightning damage to an enemy increases all damage we deal to them by 5% for 10 seconds, stacking once per element. And the legendary bonus is an increase in non-physical damage multiplier. For our third board, we're going to be taking Static Surge, so after spending mana, our next cast of Chain Lightning or Charge Bolts makes enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds and restores 10% of our mana. This mana cost requirement is reduced by mana cost reduction bonuses, so in my case it's 92 mana. And for the glyph, we're going to be using Unleash, which grants a bonus to all magic nodes within range, and after spending 50 mana, we deal 8% increased damage, and gain 25% increased mana regen for 3 seconds. The legendary bonus is a increase in damage multiplier. For our fourth board, we're going to take the Elemental Summoner board, so our Conjuration skills have a 10% reduced cooldown or mana cost. They also deal bonus damage equal to 10% of the total amount of our bonus damage with Fire, Lightning, and Cold, up to 60%, which is our current bonus. For the glyph, we're going to be using Charged, which gives us Crackling Energy damage, and picking up Crackling Energy grants us 5% increased damage for 5 seconds, up to 15%. The legendary bonus is an increase in Lightning damage multiplier. And for our fifth and final board, we're going to be taking Frigid Fate, so we deal bonus damage to vulnerable enemies equal to 20% of the total amount of our bonus damage with Cold, up to a maximum of 60%, which is what we have. And for the glyph, we're using Tactician, which grants bonus to all rare nodes within range, and we deal 10% increased damage for 4 seconds after casting a defensive skill. This duration is increased by 4 seconds for each defensive skill not on the action bar. And the legendary bonus is another increase in damage multiplier. So that wraps it up for the Paragon board. This is all going to be in the build planner in the description below along with everything else, so if I went too quickly for you, make sure to check that out. Next we move on to the Mercenaries. For our hired mercenary, I'm going to be taking Heir, and we're going to be going down the left side of his skill tree, taking Shield Charge, Heir's Guard, Provoke, and Mocking Lure. As for our reinforcement mercenary, we're taking Variana, and we're going to be using Bloodthirst. So Variana's Bloodthirst grants us 10% attack speed for 7 seconds, and has a 22-second cooldown. And we're going to attach that to our Ice Armor. So whenever Bloodthirst is available, when we cast Ice Armor, we will get that 10% attack speed for 7 seconds. Next up, we have the gear. I'm going to be going over the Mythic version of the build as I mentioned. The build planner will have links to the non-Mythic version, as well as to my idea of the perfect version of the build. Starting with the Helm, we're going with the Heir of Perdition, that gives us damage to angels and demons, critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, movement speed, and core skills, and we're going to masterwork the core skills. As for its aspect, we succumb to hatred and earn Mother's Favour, increasing our damage dealt by 60%. Slaughter enemies to briefly steal Mother's Favour from nearby allies. And for the gems, we'll put in 2 topazes for intelligence. For our chest piece, we're going to be using the Shroud of False Death, that gives us 1 to all passives, all stats, maximum life, damage on next attack after entering stealth, and resource generation. We want to try and masterwork the all stats here. I took this piece from my Spiritborn, so I didn't want to remasterwork the max life off of it. As for its unique aspect, if we haven't dealt damage in the last 2 seconds, we gain stealth and 40% additive movement speed. We're going to be putting Tam and Ohm here for the runes, so whenever we cast a non-channeled core skill, we gain 25 offering points. And when we reach 600 offering points, we invoke the Barbarian's Warcry, increasing our damage dealt by 15% for 6 seconds. Next up, we have the gloves. We're going to be using some standard gloves with intelligence, attack speed, and ranks into Chain Lightning. We're going to temper this with lucky hit % chance to freeze, and shock critical strike damage. As for the masterworking, we're going to try and masterwork the ranks into Chain Lightning. For the aspect, we'll be using Shredding Blades, so Ice Blade's chance to apply Vulnerable is increased by 20%, and the Vulnerable duration is increased by 4 seconds. We also gain 15 to 35% multiplicative vulnerable damage. Next up we have the pants. We're using Axial Conduit here. That gives us chance for Chain Lightning to hit twice, damage reduction, resource generation and maximum, and ranks into Chain Lightning. We want to try and masterwork the ranks into Chain Lightning. And if you can also get a greater affix on the chance for Chain Lightning to hit twice, it really helps out a lot here. As for its aspect, Chain Lightning alternates between orbiting us and seeking up to 3 enemies. When it returns, it drains 6 mana from us for each active Chain Lightning. After draining 66 total mana, the bolt will explode for lightning damage. Also, Chain Lightning expires if you don't have enough mana for it to drain. And in these pants we're also going to put runes, Pock and Cry, so whenever we spend 300% of our maximum resource, we'll invoke the Spiritborn's Vortex, dealing damage and pulling in enemies. Next up for the boots, we're going to be using some regular boots here with intelligence, mana per second, and armor. We're going to temper that with lucky hit % chance to freeze and teleport cooldown reduction. As for the masterworking, you want to masterwork the armor unless it is a greater affix, then you can masterwork the intelligence. As for the aspect, we'll be using the Orange Herald, so on lucky hit, we have up to a 5 to 13% chance to reduce the cooldown of our ultimate skill by 2 seconds, and that can only happen once per skill cast. This is what allows us to keep our unstable currents running at all times. Next up we have the main hand weapon. We're going to be using a wand for the fast attack speed, 1.2 attacks per second, and the vulnerable damage. For the affixes, we want to look for intelligence, critical strike damage, and lucky hit up to a 15% chance to restore primary resource. Try and get a greater affix on that if possible, it really helps out a lot. As for the tempering, we're going to go for a chance for Chain Lightning to hit twice, and shock critical strike damage, not critical strike chance. And for the masterworking, you want to masterwork the Chain Lightning to hit twice. As for the aspect, we'll be using Storm Swell here, so we'll deal 15 to 35% multiplicative increased damage while Ice Armor is active, and this amount is increased by another 15% multiplicative against frozen enemies. And for our socket, the gem we're going to be using is Emerald for critical strike damage. Next up we have the Amulet. A standard amulet here, we're going to be looking for something with intelligence, ranks into Conjuration Mastery, and ranks into Devouring Blaze. This is a really hard amulet to get, so if you can't get those, then go for attack speed instead. We're going to temper this with shock critical strike damage and unstable currents cooldown reduction. And for the masterworking, we want to try and get the ranks into Conjuration Mastery. Second best would be Devouring Blaze. As for the aspect, we're using Lightning Rod, so Chain Lightning has a 25% chance to deal 75 to 135% multiplicative increased damage, and this chance is doubled against bosses or crowd controlled enemies and prefers them as targets. As for the gem, we're going to be using a diamond here for the resistance to all elements. Next up, our first ring is the Ring of Starless Skies. This gives us attack speed, critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, and ranks into core skills, and will masterwork the ranks into core skills. As for its aspect, spending our primary resource reduces the resource cost of our skills and increases our damage by 10% multiplicative for 3 seconds, and this can stack up to 50%. And for the gem here, we're going to be using a skull for the armor. Although if your boots have a greater affix on armor, you can get away with going for a diamond here, and that will cap out all of your resistances if they aren't already. So if you're lacking armor, use a skull. If you're lacking a bit of resistance, use the diamond. For our second ring, we're using Tal Rasha's Iridescent Loop. That gives us lucky hit chance, non-physical damage, cooldown reduction, and ranks into potent warding. We're going to try and masterwork the cooldown reduction. As for its aspect, casting a Pyromancy, Shock or Frost skill increases our damage by 10 to 25% multiplicative for 8 seconds, and that stacks once per element. Casting again refreshes all bonuses if the previous skill was a different element. With this build we get 3 stacks of Tal Rashas, but if you let it expire, you won't get back to 3 unless you enter a new zone or instance. The reason this is because whenever you enter a new zone or instance, Familiar will default to Fire. So this is what allows you to get that fire stack, and it's easy to maintain your stacks due to the constant alternating between frost and shock skills. So whenever you enter a new place, you will see Familiar has been reset and shows the all 3 elements icon, and thus will summon a fire familiar and give you the fire stack for your ring. And for the gem here, we're going to be using whatever fits our needs, so you would either use a skull if you need armor, or a diamond if you need more resistances. And last but not least, we have the offhand. We're going to be looking for something with intelligence, critical strike chance, and cooldown reduction. As for the tempering, we're going to go for a chance for Chain Lightning to hit twice, and shock critical strike damage. And for the masterworking, we're going to masterwork the chance for Chain Lightning to hit twice. If your chance for Chain Lightning to hit twice is already going to go over 100%, then you would use the other masterworkings on the cooldown reduction, or critical strike chance if you don't have cooldown reduction. As for the aspect, we're going to be using Conceited, so we deal 10 to 30% multiplicative increased damage while we have a barrier active. And as for the gem, we're going to be using another emerald here for more critical strike damage. So that pretty much wraps it up for the build. As you see it here, the maximum pit I've cleared is 85, but with perfect gear you'll obviously be able to clear higher. So thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video or made it this far or learned something, please leave a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment in the comment section below if you feel like it. Really appreciate all of that. Helps the channel grow, and it really means a lot. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!